He conquered more land than Alexander, more people than Napoleon, and left behind more descendants than any man in history. But the empire of Genghis Khan wasn't built on horses and steel alone. It was built on the bodies of women, millions of them. Tonight we'll uncover how one man's trauma turned into the most systematic campaign of sexual exploitation the world has ever seen. Before we begin, do me a favor. Drop a quick comment with the time in your location right now. It helps this channel massively, and it shows me how far across the world this story is being heard. The Mongol Empire is often remembered for its unmatched conquests, stretching from Korea to Hungary, creating the largest contiguous empire in history. But behind the legends of cavalry charges and military genius lies another story, a story of abduction, sexual violence, forced pregnancy, and genetic conquest so vast that 16 million men alive today still carry Genghis Khan's Y chromosome. This isn't simply about brutality, it's about how trauma shaped one man, Temujin, later Genghis Khan, and how his personal wounds metastasized into a continental system of organized exploitation. To understand it, we must begin not with his armies, but with his wife, Borte, and the 8 months that defined the future of Eurasia. In 1184, Temujin was just another young tribal leader. He had recently married Borte, a teenage bride in an alliance meant to stabilize his fragile position, but stability was a luxury the Mongol steppe never allowed. At dawn, a band of merkits, enemies with an old blood feud against Temujin's family, swept into his camp. Temujin fled on horseback. Borte was captured. She vanished for 8 long months, held as the property of a warrior named Chilger. The chronicles gloss over what happened, but the truth is clear from the outcome. When Temujin rescued her with the help of his blood brother Jamuka, Borte was heavily pregnant. The child Jochi was named Guest. His uncertain paternity haunted him, and Temujin for life. To the Mongols, a woman taken by enemies carried permanent shame. For Temujin, that shame burned like acid. He had fled once. He would never flee again. When he turned his vengeance on the merkits, he slaughtered them wholesale, men, women, and children. But death was not enough. He wanted them to endure what Borte had endured. He wanted their shame to mirror his. This was the template. What had happened to Borte would be inflicted on the world. Modern psychologists would recognize the pattern. Victimization flipped into domination. The powerless young husband who lost his wife became the conqueror who claimed thousands. For Genghis Khan, sexual domination became a form of revenge and a weapon of war. To take an enemy's women was not only to humiliate him, but to erase his bloodline. Every forced pregnancy meant one less enemy child and one more Mongol heir. This philosophy required structure, it required organization, and Genghis Khan had the genius to build not just an empire of land, but an empire of exploitation. The chronicles describe a staggering number, 7,000 women in Genghis Khan's personal collection. Managing such a system demanded bureaucracy. Captured women were evaluated on a 100-point scale: age, beauty, noble birth, virginity. The highest scoring went to the Khan himself. The next tier became rewards for generals, officers, soldiers, and common troops received lower-scoring women. Those scoring below 60 were forced into military brothels that followed the army, servicing soldiers with industrial efficiency. Chinese records describe women sorted by ethnicity: Persians, Russians, Tanguts, as if they were varieties of wine. Guards, doctors, administrators managed them like inventory. Ledgers tracked pregnancies, deaths, and assignments. This was not random brutality. It was a sexual economy. Women became currency. Entire conquered cities were reduced to numbers in Mongol logs, and when Genghis turned his armies against the Tatars, the system reached a horrifying refinement. The Tatars had once poisoned Temujin's father. In 1202, Genghis took revenge. His orders were precise: kill every Tatar male taller than a wagon axle. The women were distributed to soldiers, not in chaos, but in careful hierarchy. Young women went to elite warriors, older ones to common troops. Pregnant women were monitored. Resistance meant execution. The goal was not extermination, but absorption. Every Tatar woman would bear Mongol children. Within a generation, the Tatars ceased to exist as a distinct people. Genetic conquest had begun. After each victory, women and girls were gathered into central squares for selection. Stripped of clothes, forced to stand in the open, they were examined like livestock. Girls under 7 were usually killed. Women over 40 often met the same fate. The useful range was 8 to 35. Beauty, symmetry, and virginity raised a woman's score. Noble lineage added extra value. A Persian chronicler describes one such selection at Samarkand. 40,000 women processed in 3 days. Those chosen entered the Mongol system. The rest were killed, discarded, or given to low-ranking soldiers for brutal use until death. One girl, a Tangut princess named Geril, scored 98. She would eventually be given to Genghis himself, and one day, she would change history. The Mongol postal system, the Yam, was a marvel of logistics. Stretching thousands of miles, it allowed messages to travel across the empire at unmatched speed. But hidden within this infrastructure was another network, comfort houses. At every major station, women were kept for passing soldiers. Inventories listed their ages, conditions, and origins. Tokens indicated which rank of soldier could access them. This was state-funded exploitation, no payment required, just show your token. Women were rotated across stations to prevent escape. Many died in transit. Ledgers recorded them like spoiled goods. The Mongols even developed best practices manuals for managing these facilities. At its peak, an estimated 50,000 women were trapped in this network. Generational slavery, institutionalized. The scale of forced pregnancies was unprecedented. Modern DNA studies show that 1 in every 200 men alive today descends directly from Genghis Khan. This wasn't chance, it was deliberate policy. Enemy aristocracies were targeted. Their daughters bore Mongol children, ensuring that noble bloodlines were replaced. Boys were raised as Mongols, girls became future concubines. The Mongols called it watering foreign fields with Mongol rain. Wombs became weapons. Entire peoples were absorbed genetically. This was conquest not just of land, but of blood itself. In 1223, after crushing the Oirat Confederation, Genghis staged an atrocity that became legend. 4,000 girls, aged 7 to 15, were gathered in the capital square. Their parents were forced to watch as soldiers divided them among units. Resistance meant torture and death. Compliance meant lifelong slavery. Platforms were built so the horror could be seen by all. The message was clear: resist the Mongols, and your daughters will pay. The cries of those girls echoed across the steppe. The Oirat never recovered. Other tribes surrendered faster, fearing the same fate. Psychological warfare through sexual violence was perfected that day. The Mongols refined their methods constantly. They experimented with timing, immediate assaults versus delayed ones to build fear. They weaponized climate, exploiting freezing cold or desert heat. They forced victims to blaspheme during violation, to curse their gods, to praise Genghis. Sacred temples became sites of desecration. Doctors were employed not to heal, but to keep women alive for further use. Manuals cataloged effective techniques. Torture became science. This was not chaos. It was administration. The machinery of empire applied to the destruction of human dignity. Among Genghis Khan's 7,000 concubines was the Tangut princess Geril, the girl who scored 98. She had watched her family executed, her mother leap to her death, her sisters taken. She endured 3 years in the Khan's tent, waiting, watching. Then one night, during a storm, she acted. Hiding a thin blade in her hair, she approached the aging conqueror. As thunder masked the sounds, she whispered in Mongolian. For the Tangut, her strike was precise. The man who had built an empire on exploitation was cut down by one of his victims. His generals would later cover it up, claiming illness, an accident, anything but the truth. But among the women, the story spread. Genghis Khan had died as he lived, surrounded by captives, but undone by one of them. The Mongol sexual terror didn't end with Genghis's death. The systems he created continued for decades under his successors, but his passing marked the beginning of cracks in the empire. The scars, however, remained. architecture in Central Asia adapted with hidden rooms for women, marriage ages dropped to protect girls, entire cultures restructured around preventing another Mongol-style catastrophe, and the genetic scars remain too. Millions today carry the legacy of those forced pregnancies, a living reminder of the largest campaign of sexual exploitation in history. Genghis Khan is remembered as a military genius, but behind the victories lay something darker, a man who turned his personal trauma into a weapon against humanity. What began with Borte's abduction became a system that spanned continents, a network of brothels, postal stations, and concubines, a demographic event that rewrote the human genome. And in the end, justice came not from armies, but from a single woman's hidden blade. Before you go, I'll ask you again, comment the time and your location right now. It helps this video reach more people, and it shows how far this community stretches. And if you want more untold histories, more truths that textbooks skip, subscribe, like this video, and share.